Hi everybody. We're here to talk about this again, as you can see from the title. So, welcome.
What is the title? Have we decided that the title is It's Time to Save Tricking?
As clickbaity as it could possibly be.
I think that's a good title. I think that sounds pretty.
Yeah. Well, the audience knows before we do, really. So
we're flying blind here, but I'm sure we'll come up with.
But if you really want to know, it's about adrenaline, which shocker. But
that thing that everybody else is currently talking about. We're talking about it too.
Yeah,
we are talking tricks, right? So
that's true.
We would be remiss if we didn't talk about this, honestly.
Yeah. So here we are back again, because adrenaline fucked up again another year, and I guess there's no surprises there, but it seems like they just royally fuck up even more every time. So, but yeah, so we're here to talk about it, and the first thing I want to talk about is it even worth talking about?
Hold on, Frank. Before you get started with this, I do have like an unscripted question for the both of you.
Yes.
Did you guys, how much fanfare did you feel was around this one? I felt like this one wasn't as promoted as like last year's. I felt like last year's was like I knew what was going on, but this year felt very sudden, very.
Oh, it stuck up on me. I didn't know
it snuck up on me too, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not at all paying attention to anything like adrenaline related, so it might literally just be that I don't have any of the lines dropped for it.
And as we'll come to learn later, that's how it should be, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Or
I try my best to know the least amount about adrenaline. That being said, this specific episode is not like last year's where we just talk shit. This episode, we're going to talk shit still, but we're also going to offer some solutions. So,
our goal here is we're not going to solve the problem of adrenaline in 1 hour long conversation because that is ridiculous. Instead, we would kind of like to just interject some things to hopefully make this conversation a bit more productive. Because there have been some people musing lately that the conversations on this topic serve no purpose. And I think that that's incredibly wrong, and I can give lots of arguments for that case. But I think that they are correct in the fact that the way that the conversation is currently conducted is not accomplishing anything. And so that's what I'd like to, say. We're going to address the problems and how they currently stand. But like Frank said, we're interested in giving some examples of things that can be done better. Like there's got to be a path back to forgiveness because this isn't just a fuck adrenaline episode. The goal here isn't the death of adrenaline. The goal here is tricking companies that aren't exploitative. That's the
I think we should rephrase that last statement and say we are looking for the death of adrenaline in adrenaline's current state.
Yes.
Okay. Simply put, we cannot stand by and at least not try to get something going when adrenaline is behaving in the way that it is. Just disregard to the tricking community because as we'll come to learn, it's not even about the tricking community. So, but with our platform, I felt that it was important that we do talk about this, and I know that you guys feel the same because we have definitely a lot to say about this. So
yeah, and to offer a little bit of my perspective of why I think this is an important conversation topic, I have had we have a friend group where we talk a lot, and one of our friends said that me and Jason were being hyperbolic or maybe he didn't say us exactly. He was just like everyone who complains about adrenaline is being hyperbolic when they say like it's the most evil company in the world. And to be fair, I don't think they're the most evil company in the world. They suck. But I don't think
EA still exists.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic in my concerns though, because this is something that can impact the future culture of tricking because adrenaline has a lot of money, and that really goes a long way. It goes a long way to developing establishments that stay for a long time. And so if we don't critique it and we don't try to steer it in the right direction, we can see a mainstream version of tricking that is not at all reflective of our tricking culture. So that's why it's so important to me that we talk about this.
Absolutely.
And
And
I'm sorry, Bryce. I just want to mention really quick that this kind of thing is also unprecedented, right? So we as a culture have never faced a company with as much pull as it has, right? To create these events, get the attention that it gets within and without of the community, and as well as having, Mike on a leash, for lack of a better term, as well as pull with other famous trickers, right? Like we've never really seen it at this level. And so how do we respond? We need to be prepared for this because this may or may not be the first time or the last time that happens, and depending on how we respond to it can really genuinely impact the course of tricking. So.
Absolutely. And the response does not necessarily have to be going and starting your own tricking business. This is a sentiment that has been put forward by the very respectable, someone who I personally have a great deal of respect and admiration for, Tommy Case, Sir Thomas. He suggested that it's pointless to have these discussions and planning about it, and that really the only way that you can make any contribution to the current situation, even if you disagree with adrenaline, is to start your own tricking company. And, well, I just want to suggest that perhaps maybe that wasn't as well thought out as it could have been. Mm-hmm. Because generally, when we have a complicated problem on our hands, the best thing to do is not attempt every solution that comes first into our head. It's usually to discuss and plan things out first so that we're not wasting resources and so that the few attempts that we do get are more likely to actually succeed. Mm-hmm. Suggesting that you are doing nothing by talking about the problem in tricking unless you open up your own tricking company is like saying that, everybody talking about the medical problem, the current issue of medical and insurance monopolies in America is just not contributing at all. And really the only thing that they could do is open their own medical practice, right? And unless you open your own medical practice, you might as well just not talk about it at all. It's like, no, there are plenty of activists who are probably, they're certainly not about to topple the medical monopoly in America anytime soon. But I think they're probably going to do a whole lot better actually actively lobbying lawmakers than they are like going and starting a medical practice, And
it's interesting because I just now realized how far that metaphor works for this, because when you start your own medical practice, you're not just like, oh, I'm just going to charge the cheapest thing ever. Like you're competing against market values. You're trying to stay afloat. You're trying to make money for the business that you can put back into the businesses. And these big corporations are really good at crushing the living shit out of these small practices. And in a similar way with adrenaline, it's like it's very hard to start your own tricking company, and in part it's because of how big adrenaline is, because they get so much clout around them. So and I'm not saying it's impossible, but definitely if this is your passion, go ahead and you have the capital, do it. And that's the other part of this is not everyone has the capital to just start a tricking company. It's not that easy. But
everybody has the time to think about this problem and the voice to be able to speak to others about it. And that's why I think it's really important that we don't denigrate the concept of talking about this problem, because unlike what is suggested by others in the community, that it literally accomplishes nothing. Mm-hmm. I told this joke in our Facebook Messenger group earlier, but legends tell of a time way back in history mm-hmm. where people could talk to people who disagreed with them and learn something that deepened their understanding of the topic. It's crazy, I know. I know it sounds really strange and foreign, but it can actually happen. But it can only happen if the way we all approach the conversation is genuine and in good faith. So, for instance, the last thread that I saw about this, I saw lots of people going ahead and posting in long, paragraph-long laundry lists of things that they had, issues that they had with adrenaline. And I saw a lot of people on the side of adrenaline whose responses to them were essentially, you're a hater, or who are you, or an equivalent. Mm-hmm. Basically saying you are X, so I don't have to listen to you, which is what's known in argumentation as an ad hominem attack.
Yep.
Which very specifically is not a counter argument. Mm-hmm. So nobody who reads that and is against you is convinced by that. They just think you're an asshole. Yep. And many of the people who are on your side and read that they're not unconvinced by what you said. but they're not happy that you're the one who's supporting their ideas with non-arguments. Then again, they're not coming back and providing the arguments. So, you know.
Yeah. And so, Jason, did you have something to say?
You can go ahead, Frank.
Okay. All I was going to say, I was going to move on from this point, and the last thing I wanted to add was that Tommy Case made a point of not complaining, because complaining doesn't do anything. And while complaining has a very negative connotation attached to it, because in some cases it's dumb to complain, but especially like when you don't have power. But in other cases, it's a very good thing to complain. And in fact, a lot of our society is based off of complaining to achieve an end. And I think that's legitimately what we're doing if we're, critiquing adrenaline in a productive manner. And that's really what we're trying to achieve here. We want adrenaline to be better, or we want a different company to do a way better job than adrenaline is doing. So, yeah.
Right. I want to say that if it like talking about it isn't is all bad either, because it really, like, from what I've seen based on all of this, is that there are a lot of people who do not like what adrenaline is doing. And
it's
a lot of people,
amount of people. Like, if you look at the comments of any adrenaline post, it's insane. But go on.
Right. But essentially that, right? Like, if and we'll get to some actions that we can take as a collective later on in this episode, but like essentially we can exert what power we have if we, cooperate, come together, and like everyone who doesn't like what adrenaline is doing, like if we work together to form an alternative solution, right, then that would be more successful than just complaining about it. So that's, just actionable steps we can take there instead of complaining, right, is get together, form a response. How are we going to deal with X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, exactly. And we'll give those actionable things in our episode.
Some examples that we've thought of, at least.
Yeah. So we came up with kind of 3 main points of critique that we have towards adrenaline. And in my opinion, they're increasing in importance. So we start with the least important thing.
And also, they're not. This isn't like a cumulative sum total of all of our problems. This is mostly the things that are on our minds, based specifically on what recently happened. So we're not saying that this is the only issues that we have with adrenaline, but the recent event really brought these to light, and these are the things that we currently want to talk about.
They have a long history of fucking up, but
yes,
we
just being in general
that now.
That'd be like a 5-hour podcast. Anyway, so
coming soon though.
Yeah. So I will say, I think the most visible aspect of what was weird about this adrenaline event was just how cringy the battle culture was. It was just that was like the one I saw the most visceral response to, like the one where like Alexander Anderson and Michael Guthrie are like almost kissing or whatever. It was very cringy.
Yeah, the UFC mean mugging. I got to tell you what, like this idea that we're going to adopt culture and things from other sports in order to get people to watch tricking. It's like we're going to make them think that it's like UFC so that they'll like tricking. It's like, no, you should make them think that it's like tricking so that they'll watch tricking. Like
it's so disingenuous.
Exactly. You shouldn't try to trick them into something that they are not actually interested in watching. It's like, oh, I like this, so I like this. No, not necessarily. MMA, UFC is fucking nothing like tricking. Not in culture, not in execution, not in goals.
Mm-hmm. It almost gives the impression like these people are going to be performing these tricks against the other person, like in physical, like,
They're kicking them with a 10.
Like literally. And that's so much. I can't even get into just
like it's that. Like it portrays some level of, and obviously it's got to be acted. I don't genuinely believe that Alexander Anderson and Michael Guthrie have any beef.
No.
But like just the played up animosity for the screen, cringe is the only way that I can describe it. It is like nuclear cringe.
It's so stupid. That's just so stupid.
Yeah, the worst part is just it's very opposite of what tricking culture has always been. Like, people know, even like people outside of tricking know tricking as like, oh my god, I saw this sport and people were cheering on for like every single thing that was going on. And there was just like hugs all over, and there's clapping, and there's like cheer. It was like crazy. Like, that's what tricking is honestly known for. And it's so funny because Michael Guthrie in that post, like one of his comments was hugs and kisses don't sell. And I just so vehemently disagree with that. Like I think
let's say they don't. Let's accept the argument that hugs and kisses don't sell. So that in order to make tricking sell, we have to turn it into something that has a tremendous amount of animus. We have to give up the current culture of tricking if we ever want to see it progress to a sport that's mainstream.
Yeah. No.
I don't like that.
I hate that, honestly. That sounds, I mean, we're talking about, a community that accepts a lot of people who generally feel like outsiders of the typical communities they exist in.
The sport itself is cool as shit. There's nothing that's not awesome about being able to do multiple flips off of one foot over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. But I gotta say, as cool as it is, it literally pales in comparison to the experience of just being around other trickers. Mm-hmm. Pales.
I agree.
And I wouldn't want to trade that literally for anything. Literally, I would not want to trade that for the existence of professional trickers.
Yeah, it's just like, I'll take, I'm not one of those people who's like, we have to keep tricking underground, because I really don't believe that. But you know what? If that's what it took to, like, keep our current culture of tricking, I would 100% take that in a heartbeat.
And Frank, that's a prank
that needs to stay underground for that culture to remain prevalent. But yeah, if the deal that we have to make in order to become prevalent is to give up that culture, I will choose the culture over the mainstream money every fucking day of the week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really agree with these points. Essentially, that it's easy to get caught up in the whole like adrenaline. Like if you hate adrenaline, you hate the idea of tricking progressing. But that's not at all what it's about. It's about compromising the identity of tricking. Mm-hmm. For tricking to succeed. And I don't believe we have to do that.
Making it look more like other sports so that it can gain the legitimacy that those other sports have. It's like, no, how about you just make tricking itself legitimate and stop trying to piggyback off of other sports' legitimacy? You're not those other sports. Those sports have nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. And once again, it looks really cringe when you just like take aspects of their culture and then pretend like they're important to tricking, like the belts and the mean mugging and all these other things. It's just nobody looks at it and thinks that you're cool, and that's literally why you're doing it.
I can literally name off the top of my head the only two trickers in the world that watch UFC, and it's Michael Guthrie and Dan Pitlock. Those are the only two motherfuckers who watch UFC. And, we have the belt now for Adrenaline, which also just like, it just feels like they're throwing Michael Guthrie a party, which I know we said in our last episode.
Dude, the Michael Guthrie birthday party is my favorite point that never caught on. I wish that did, because that's such a good roast of these events. Like it's literally the Barack Obama meme where Barack Obama is giving himself the Medal of Honor. Like it's literally that. It's Adrenaline giving Mike the championship belt again and again, and then they're like, and still like, oh, we didn't see it coming. Like big surprise.
Like, it was the most predictable thing in the world that he would win
this. It's exhausting. Honestly, like you watch this and you're like, this is so played out that I don't even want to like engage with it. That's how I feel at this point personally.
And as much as Mike says that like hugs and kisses and other shit doesn't sell, and so what I can only assume is the purpose of the mean mugging and the belt and all this is literally just to provide additional content, to provide additional hype, more stuff for more eyeballs to be stuck to be interested in. It's like, compare the mean mugging moment to the interviews from Trickstar.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's all that really needs to be said. If you're telling me that cringe as fuck mean mugging couple of seconds is better and more productive for your battle organization than the Trickstar interviews, I don't trust your opinion on these things.
Yeah,
right. I agree.
It caught on, but like in the worst way ever. And the Trickstar ones have a positive light in my head. But
unfortunately, that's something we're going to get into as well. That like Trickstar was something that everybody was hyped for. It's something that everybody was excited to watch. People were interested in the interviews. They wanted to see some of the coolest trickers from the last generation actually throw down in a battle in a really professional setting. And everything, despite a couple of hiccups where some performers really didn't give it their all a couple of times, everyone was still pretty excited for what was going right up until the very end.
Are you talking about Sesh doing 4 front flips in a row?
Yes,
There's 3, but yes. I remember because it damaged my tricking forever.
That would be the people who are not necessarily putting their all into this competition. But the thing that what's strange is like even that didn't necessarily kill the hype train that Trickstar had. What killed the hype train that Trickstar had was when the battle between Andrew Franklin and Michael Guthrie occurred, and the judges gave that battle to Andrew Franklin. And every tricker across the planet collectively said, "Oh, that's bullshit."
We will talk about that exact situation that happened in Adrenaline in the next point.
I do want to say, though, about the Trickstar battles was that, like you had said, Bryce, everyone was interested in watching it without compromising the identity of tricking. It was still very much about the tricks, about the community. It wasn't about, I mean, of course it's a battle, so it's about like who's going to win. But of course it wasn't this like, oh, I'm going to beat you or whatever. There was a mutual respect held by each of the participants.
No one bastardized the culture of tricking in the midst of those battles in order to make them more saleable to an audience, which is what's clearly happened to Adrenaline.
Right.
And like, at some level you understand like they're trying to make it more saleable to an audience, but they're doing it by taking the thing that makes tricking unique away from what they're offering. So you just get a watered down version of the UFC.
Yeah.
Right. Essentially what I hear is like, you're doing this, but at what cost? And that cost is the identity of tricking, which in my opinion is integral to the sport.
And it's long-term financial stability. Short-term, you might actually be able to get more of the people who like tune into UFC-like stuff, a whole bunch of normies who will watch that sort of thing potentially. Probably going to be more like sport karate kids than anything. But you might be able to get some of them by sacrificing tricking's identity on the altar of your financial success. But in the future, those people are going to very quickly find out that what you're presenting is a watered-down version of the thing that they're actually interested in, and they'll go back to the thing they're actually interested in, and you won't have the unique thing that sets you apart from the other industries to get the people who are interested in that unique thing to come watch you.
So really quick, Bryce, I do want to counter because this was a point that another one of our friends had made in response to us being hyperbolic, was that inevitably people who are truly interested in what tricking actually is will find the sport naturally. And while I almost agree with that, and I just think it's a little bit of wishful thinking, because in reality, we have people who do not who currently are in the community as semi-respectable trickers who are like, last generation's hyper kids or XMA kids, people like Mackenzie Emery, people like Jacob Pinto, who is also like affiliated with Adrenaline now as well.
That's an easy argument to make when you've been exposed to all this stuff since you were a child.
Right. So that's the thing, is that there are people who will still find allegiance with what Adrenaline or whatever tricking conglomerate that we don't agree with is making. So part of that is, I feel like it's not like a blanket argument for this being hyperbolic. I feel like it's an argument in favor of us in that, there are people who will still be loyal to them. And we see that in people who aren't necessarily like hyper kids. Like, I'm going to name drop Jeff Haynes for being a Mike Dick writer, but I mean, here we are. That's just what he is.
No, he literally only comes up in the tricking page to defend Michael Guthrie.
And Adrenaline. Yeah, absolutely. And as sad as it is, it exists. And that's the thing, is that we can't just dismiss that, and we can't just pretend like it doesn't exist, because it absolutely does. And I think it.
Sorry, finish your thing.
I was just gonna say, I think it exists at varying levels, but despite that,
yeah, I was gonna say I want to be conscious about the type of people that I attract to tricking, and if Adrenaline is the biggest thing, I'm worried about the people we would attract to tricking. I want people who want to be in it because they love how supportive the whole community is. I know that's a big reason why I got in and why a lot of my friends got in, and so it consciously developing your culture is a very important part of any blossoming community, in my opinion. So.
Yeah. It's like
people who are pro Adrenaline, or even people who are being paid by Adrenaline, suggesting to other people that they're being babies for not giving up this aspect of tricking culture so that you can make money is really selfish.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? Like, you are the person who stands to benefit from this exclusively. So telling everybody else that they're being, stupid for not just handing you money is, well, you understand why everybody else kind of doesn't view you very highly at the moment.
Right. And I think we're truly hitting on what the issue with this thing is that it's, detrimental to the identity of tricking. Because Frank is absolutely right. Like, I don't necessarily someone coming into tricking who thinks that it's this UFC style sport, trying to get all like serious up in these, up at the session, when it's really just about having fun and like supporting your friends. Like, that's all it's ever been about. And it's never been about like being better than one another, even though it feels like that at times, and it can with like, rivalries. Like, I know Frank and I definitely had a period where we were in a more competitive nature, but at the same time, like, there was no true animosity there.
Yeah.
It was just what it was.
It turns out that the real tricking was the friends we made along the way.
Oh my god!
No, I do want to add a point here, though. I'm gonna circle back to the shit talking, because I think it's important to point out that shit talking does not accomplish what Mike thinks it's accomplishing. I think what he thinks it's accomplishing is like, look how good I am. I don't even have to try for these bitches. But when you actually don't have to try for these bitches, you just look like a dweeb. And so, like, I think it'd be more impressive if, for example, you were giving interviews before the battle and you're like, this Alexander Anderson has trained his whole life. Like, he is an insanely talented tricker. He's landed quad cork. He's going to be a formidable opponent. So I really need to train hard. And, I'm really hoping to beat him, but, like, he's going to be a great opponent. Like, I think that, in my opinion, is way more impressive than, like, bro, this shit's light. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
yeah, somehow humility is always going to be more, it's just always going to be a more positive experience to watch than delusions of grandeur.
Yeah.
Additionally, it kind of, like, upsells the competition a bit, right? Like, so people who might be leaning, like, oh, Mike has an easy win here. Mm-hmm. Mike can actually put in perspective, like, actually, Alexander Anderson's the first person to quad court.
Stop.
One of the first people to cork him back out. Like,
I guess
stuff
all
like
of our
this.
codes are put down now.
So, essentially, like, I don't think that exactly it doesn't serve the point it needs to serve. So.
by previous injection in another episode that may or may not have actually been posted already. When you have one goal and you try to accomplish it by doing something and you accomplish the exact opposite, that is literally the definition of being unintelligent.
Yeah.
So
dumb as shit. Sorry, Mike.
No, I'm not. I'm not, dude. I'm not. I mean, let's be honest, dude. Here's the point. I'm past it. Like, I got respect for Mike, but Mike more than likely doesn't respect me, so fuck it. I don't care. I don't care what he thinks. He already doesn't think highly of us if he thinks anything of us at all.
Whether Mike respects me or not is kind of irrelevant. I have respect for his ability, and honestly, the few times that I have met him in person, like, he's been over to the porn house back when I was down in the desert and was still hosting gatherings there. Like, I've met him in person, and he's totally a chill, genuine, cool guy when you're talking to him in person. But, like, on the internet, he just loses all of that.
Jackass. He's got the Mason Raleigh effect. And I got all love for Mason because he's cool in person as well, but, like, just a dick on the internet.
Yeah.
Sorry, dude.
I was actually going to name that exact same effect, so that's...
I know you were. It's just such a common thing.
Yeah. He just hasn't aged well, and that's just it. You're right. And he's also... I'm just going to take this time to roast him. He's really bad at comebacks. Like, I commented on that one post where they're almost kissing, and I was like, now kiss. And all he commented was, you wish.
You wish. It's, oh my god, it's like, wow, dude.
You got me. I do wish. That's why I commented it.
I do wish. Like,
yeah.
I just rather you just not... If you didn't comment, it would have just been a lot better for you.
More effective, yeah.
You also got ratioed to high hell. Like, I didn't like... But anyway...
So it's weird to see someone who's so good at something that is so hard and then just so bad at something that everybody else finds pretty easy. Yeah. Comebacks on the internet, like... Okay,
other quick roast I'll bring up. The Facebook page post. I don't know if this dude was serious or not, but he said he bought a ticket to Adrenaline, and even though he didn't show up...
Dude, I commented. I bit the bait. I told him, I was like, this is so pathetic. He replied to me, I don't even care what he said. I'm just like this.
If he
If you
agreed
do
with
this,
you, he agreed with you. I don't think he actually understood what you meant when you were saying that.
Yeah.
right? He must not have because I'm talking about him and I'm talking about this attitude, like this whole.
Yeah.
Bootleg,
I can't.
describe it as it is literally bootleg. Oh my God, there's this company. Let me bend over backwards to give them money and not derive the material benefit that they're supposed to give me as a company for giving it to them. Why?
It's
I just feel like giving this company more money. What the fuck, dude?
it is genuinely infuriating.
Yeah.
Like because you can't argue with them. Like no amount of logic, facts, or reasoning will do. It just doesn't matter what you say. You
You've
just
got a ballot on your
Facts
hands.
don't care about your feelings. So, hypothetically speaking, if you were
Thank you,
to
Frank.
lick the boot, then you would be tasting food.
Exactly. And unfortunately, feelings don't care about your facts. So that guy, it doesn't matter how many times you come forward to him with like why what he's doing is really stupid and cringy. He's just never going to listen to you. So
Yeah. All right. Anyway, so yeah,
Anyway, all right, roast over. Let's
no,
get
wait,
back.
that's bootlicking behavior. Just don't do that. But yeah, roast over. Let's get to some positives. Let's come up with good ways to fix the cringe.
Yes. Because
that
here's
concept.
the thing: we don't want to just be all negative this episode. We've sort of mentioned it before, but there's a path back to forgiveness. There has to be, because if there's no path back to forgiveness, then there's no reason to ever do any better, right? If that person is just fucked forever, then they might as well be a bastard, right? They're not losing anything by doing it. And so it really behooves us as a community, if we do want to be genuine and honest about our interests in seeing tricking progress in a positive way, we do have to go forward and say that, look, there is a way back to forgiveness. There are things that you could do better. And if you did them and put your best foot forward that way, I would have to turn around and say that I support adrenaline. And I would totally start paying for your stuff too, as well.
I agree.
I'm actually in the same exact boat. It has nothing to do with adrenaline as a company or the people who run it. Anything like that. It has nothing to do with Mike. Nothing. It absolutely has to do with how the company is run and managed and how it, tries to portray the tricking community. And if they right these wrongs, then I'm with Bryce. I would absolutely spend money on things that I normally wouldn't. I would support tricking if it meant the growth and development of tricking, but only if it meant without compromising tricking's identity, which I'm going to keep saying over and over to like really hammer home that point. Like that's it. That's what this is all about.
I'm not willing to sacrifice the identity of tricking for some people's financial success.
Yeah.
Right. And no matter how much they deserve it. Does Mike absolutely deserve? I honestly, yeah, Mike.
Absolutely. He's put so much time and work and effort into it. He deserves to be able to make a decent amount of money throughout his life just from tricking. I totally agree. But if you were to ask me, if you were to tell me, look, you can give Mike and all the other people who've earned that right, that. But in order to do that, you have to give up the soul of the tricking community. My thoughts on this are already known. Yeah, so.
And just while we're on the subject of money, like imagine if they didn't spend the money to be in Mandalay Bay and they spent that money to be in a different venue that did not cost nearly as much money. They could afford to pay their trickers a lot more.
This was another point that I wanted to make as well, but I felt that our friend in the group chat that we share, Frank, was kind of dismissive of, was that this money in the right hands could have been spent so much better.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like we could have had better pay for athletes at a more accessible location at, something that isn't, ridiculous and still get the exposure that we're trying to achieve. I don't think I just think that a lot of this could have been done way better with people who actually care about tricking at the helm, making these decisions.
Yeah.
And there's no monetary amount to preventing your trickers from going to other gatherings and battles. So,
That's weird.
That is like, honestly, that is one of the things that like, it blows my mind that they did that and thought that that wouldn't be a problem. But anyway.
There's this predatory practice in medicine by hospitals. They're called non-compete agreements, which exist in a bunch of other marketplaces, by the way. But with doctors, it's a huge thing where if you work for a hospital, you have to sign a non-compete agreement that, you're not going to work for a hospital that's right nearby, like ever. And so what that does is suppress wages. It's like, oh, this hospital would have offered you $100,000 more than we would have offered you. That sucks. You can't go there.
You can't accept the job. Yep.
That's exactly the type of predatory behavior that is, you can't go to this gathering because you need X amount of money because whatever the fuck, So it's essentially non-compete agreements. So not good.
Yeah, it's literally that.
It's bad for tricking. It is. It's just like that is it. It is bad for tricking for certain athletes to be excluded from going to events that they may or may not have otherwise gone to, purely for the financial gain of one tricking company.
And
that's for tricking.
It just occurred to me that some of our viewers might not know exactly what we're talking about.
So we should probably say explicitly that we're talking about Mike not being allowed to go to Neos or any US based gathering or any maybe even international gathering that Adrenaline doesn't approve. And this is just disgusting.
Yeah, exactly.
Also,
sorry, Frank. Go ahead. I'm so sorry for interrupting, Frank. You were going to say something.
No, you brought up really good points. You're good. I was trying to get us back on topic is really all, because we were going to give some positives and we did not do that.
Yes. Yeah. Right. Positive.
Well, the real reason we're here, right? Totally. How could it have slipped our minds?
This isn't just about talking shit, right? We are here to offer solutions. Yeah. We really do, because we really do genuinely want to see a world where Adrenaline suddenly turns on its heels and does this. Really, it would be better.
Yeah.
So let's go into. So we've talked about the problems, the encroachment of UFC and other sports related culture that's been brought in to replace tricking culture to make it more marketable and more cringe.
Yes.
That's a pretty easy thing to excise, and for all the complaints that it's not nearly as marketable, I've made my argument previously. I think what you're making is a short-term plan.
A short-term financial plan, absolutely.
You're saying short-term it's not as marketable. Absolutely. Short-term it isn't. But you should be planning for the long term if you want to be a successful company. And so you should want to build your own brand and brand ethos and brand culture, and you shouldn't just try to adopt the culture of other successful organizations because people would rather just watch the original version of those organizations and not you.
Yeah. And it's funny that you say that, because I think really long term, they could be very beneficial to take this hugs and kisses approach. Like, how many sports do you watch? That conventional sports where they don't treat each other like shit. Like, there's very few sports, or like, they have a moderate amount of respect, I guess, sometimes.
Very few. Now think about all of the, I don't know how many of you actually scroll through your Facebook feed often, but maybe now and then you'll see like wholesome moments that people have recorded and just thrown up on Facebook feed. Look at how goddamn popular a wholesome moment on the internet is.
Yeah.
And Mike is just like, wholesome shit? Nobody is interested in that.
Yeah, it could totally...
I don't know, man. I don't know, man. Have you seen the internet?
This could really blossom like a lot of people's interest in tricking. Like, imagine someone just puts on the TV, just like happens to be seeing tricking, and they're like, yo, they're just like dapping each other up after that combo, like hugging each other. Like, this is kind of sick. Like, and they're
it just
doing
looks
cool shit.
Fun to be there.
Yeah.
Well, and imagine, first of all, it's fun to see it all happen, fun to take part in it, and fun to know that you're not going to get embarrassed by trying to fit in with the community, because how intimidating is tricking when you first see it, right? Like, I mean, when you first see it, I'm guarantee your first impression is either I want to do it or there's no way I could possibly do that, right? And seeing a community that is willing to teach you and willing to accept you at any stage is more than encouraging.
Yeah,
it's motivating.
I now that you say that, Jason, it feels like it was almost an evolutionary adaptation that we came up with to be accepting, to be radically accepting, because it's such an intimidating sport. It was like we had to be so welcoming to get other people in, and that's why it's popped off so hard.
Because otherwise, it's just really easy to get discouraged in the very beginning of tricking, because that's absolutely not the most fun time that you'll have during tricking at the very beginning. There are moments about it that you will recall fondly later on, but in the moment, it is a slog. All you're doing is imagining the things that you'd rather be doing at the moment. So,
yeah. And so some positive things we could see, the Trickstar style interviews. But and to be fair, Adrenaline does do pre-battle interviews. At least they did last year. I don't know. I didn't see them this year. Maybe it's behind the paywall. But they were
which we are absolutely not paying for and do not endorse paying for.
And do not pay for them. I'm not curious at all. I don't need to know.
Let me put it to the listener straight. If you pay for the paywall, and you listen to Talking Tricks, either unsubscribe from the paywall or unsubscribe from Talking Tricks.
This is your ultimatum. This is this is a
Listen.
toxic relationship. Okay?
Listen, Frank and Bryce may not agree with that radical statement, but here I am. I'm pushing it. I'm saying what needs to be said, what needs to be done, because I am the only one with the courage to do it. So here we are.
Yeah. But what I was trying to get to is they do pre-battle interviews, but they're overwhelmingly negative. They're like, oh, like, how shitty is the other tricker? And I'm totally putting words in their mouth. That's not exactly what they said. But it is a very overwhelmingly negative experience versus when we saw the Trickstar battles. It was like they explained their backstory and their biography. Like, it doesn't even have to be necessarily positive towards the other tricker, but just like, you know.
I actually think that, like, being while you're right, it doesn't necessarily have to include anything where you talk up and gas up the other tricker, because maybe you just don't know anything about them, right? And you shouldn't just lie because you don't know anything about them. But just like talking shit about them is like, once again, it's entirely orthogonal to the identity of tricking to just suddenly like talk shit about another tricker openly, especially like in as public a setting as a recording that's going to be played before a battle. Like that's really not like trickers to do, and it's something that everybody notices when it happens, because it's like, wow, what fucking sport am I watching right now?
You're right. So yeah, that'd be a cool thing to see. Also, like bowing and shaking hands before you actually
this used
battle.
to be a part of tricking. It used to be, back when we called it martial arts tricking instead of tricking, people would bow to each other far more frequently.
Hold on, Bryce, I'm not gonna lie, you're sounding a little old head there.
Look, I'm not saying we need to return back to the times of martial arts tricking. What I'm saying is that the few things that they accepted from their martial arts backgrounds, that being that you respect the person that you're currently about to go engage in a battle with, that is absolutely something that we should be. First of all, it was a part of tricking's identity from the beginning, but it's one of those things that I think we should be bringing forward into the future, like that mutual respect that we have for each other. Is something that, you know, like we've said before, it's not that there isn't mutual respect in other sports, but in some other sports, like the shit talking and all these other things, the animosity, that comes first before the respect. And that's not the case in tricking. The respect comes first because, you know,
that's the martial arts side of it.
Absolutely. It's about being an honorable, respectable warrior. We're not warriors, right? We're not going to fight anybody, but we still want to bring the spirit of the warrior forward into the modern age to find the positives that it can contribute to an era of nonviolence.
Yeah. And to be fair, with some old hood stuff, there was some disrespect. It's not like disrespect has never existed in tricking.
No,
right. It's your fault. I think about the old White Lotus battle, the very famous one that like everyone got into tricking and watched, where Danny Graham is just such a dick. Like, he's just but
and like beef has always existed too. Yeah. And honestly, I think that those things are actually healthy for tricking and do build interest. However, just not when it's artifactually made. You know, like,
and certainly not when it's the mainstream tricking, right? Yeah. When it's like that's the common thing that you can expect from trickers, that's bad. Yeah. But when there's just like a little bit of drama and beef like on the side that someone can go and look at for fun, like everybody likes that. Yeah, no one's going to pretend that people don't like seeing people talk about the tea. So it's just literally, we had a vote about it before we started recording this episode.
And listen, you can blame 92% of our viewers for voting yes on this. All right, it was an overwhelming majority who wanted this episode.
Your guys' fault. You asked for this shit.
So, absolutely.
Yeah.
So bowing and shaking hands prior to the battle, that honestly is like, first of all, it's much closer to our roots, and much closer to the sort of spirit, the culture of tricking itself. And ultimately, when you compare it to like the potential mean mugging entrance before a battle, it's just not nearly as cringy. Like, my spine doesn't want to travel to the moon when I watch two people bow to each other. But when I watch that clip of Alexander Anderson and Guthrie mean mugging each other, oh my God. My God, I'm going to cringe into orbit.
It makes like my head go into my body. Like, I'm just receding. I'm just like, but yeah. So that's a good thing. Another good thing to do is like mid-battle clapping, and when it's warranted, when it's an appropriate response. I think this is important.
you don't have to fake being interested in someone's combo.
Yes.
But like if someone does something genuinely cool and impressive to you, just like playing silent and pretending that it didn't impress you, yeah, that's not in the spirit of tricking. That's not how trickers generally engage with a battle. So many battles that I've seen, and once again, one of the things that I love most about them is that I've watched people see someone do, absolutely stomp on them with a combo that's just fucking ridiculous. And the response of that person isn't, fuck. The response of that person is to run up to that guy and hug them.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's amazing. It's one of the reasons why I love this sport.
Yeah, and the caveat of us saying the appropriate response also allows for shit talking. If you really think someone did a shitty job on their thing, go ahead, just be like, that was lame. Like, you know what I mean? It's like,
I think there are some instances of the battle gestures which are simultaneously interesting and fun for the audience while not also being overtly negative. So, like, in the past, I've seen Jacob Pinto just like after someone did a combo, just like smoke an imaginary blunt and then toss it on the ground before his next combo. And that it's great. It's short. Everybody's watching and they think it's funny. It says everything he needs to say. And it's ultimately really not all that disparaging. Yeah. It's just kind of like a short, funny joke thing in the moment.
I agree.
So.
But when you do that after Shosei just like tripped on your ass, like you just look like a dumbass. Like
it has the opposite effect when you try to do it in a situation that's unwarranted. When you try to suggest that someone who just did something ain't shit, and then the combo you follow that with is nowhere near their level.
When that combo ain't shit.
Yeah, it's like, ooh, God, that's a bad look. Don't do that. Frank, I'm about to make
try again.
Also,
I'm about to make you angry because I'm about to take a bathroom break, even though we started with this.
That's fine. I also would like to officially put out there that we should ban shotguns in tricking. We should.
I was just about to say. I was like,
no one should ever shotgun.
Yeah, don't.
That's the one thing.
What are you shooting? What are you doing? Why?
Yeah. Why?
No.
It just, I'm sorry, Mike, you ruined it for everyone. No one is allowed to shotgun anymore. You're going to jail if you shotgun. It's just,
please.
That's the rules. I'm sorry. I don't
make them. Yeah, that's how they are.
I hate that you know all my jokes, Jason.
It's true. Well, we're linked up.
Yeah.
We're like brothers, but closer. And then I lift up my shirt and it's like disgustingly anatomic.
Everyone knows the SpongeBob reference.
Of course.
So the last thing I would add to this as a positive thing is have a trophy that represents the community. So right now we got a UFC belt. It's fucking weird. Just make it something else. It's just literally.
I love your explanation. It's fucking weird. No, but it is really weird. Like, why? This looks like a professional wrestling belt, and it's not something that I would feel proud of having necessarily. Especially when it's so derivative, right? Because that's ultimately how it feels. And it's a shame that Bryce isn't here to talk about it, but he'll probably come back amidst my discussion.
There he is.
Holy shit, Jason! You're
Listen,
damn Nostradamus. Yeah, no, I heard all of that from the bathroom, but yeah, you're
perfect.
Totally right. The fact that we have a derivative trophy from another sport is like the most insulting thing in the world. We're one of the most unique and identifiable sports on the planet when you actually know about it. And we're just going to fucking take someone else's sloppy seconds? No. Let's make our own goddamn trophy and have it actually be relevant to the shit that we're doing. The best example, and I'm slightly biased here because this has to do with an event that I was very close, very near and dear to my heart as I was growing up. But having just brought up the fact that tricking kind of has a little bit to do with the heart of the warrior and sort of bringing it into a non-violent future and finding the positive aspects of that, something that New Heights did that I actually thought was incredibly, on tone for this was they gave the winner of the New Heights battle a sword. Mm-hmm. Right? And this is something that, like, in...
What kind of sword?
A katana.
Yeah, we were prompting him.
What kind of katana?
Not just any katana, Bryce.
Well, they didn't give a sakabato. But I think...
Okay. My bad.
No, they just gave an actual, just straight up katana with a edge on the violent side.
That's fucked up.
Yes. Personally, if you were to ask me what I thought would be the best trophy representing tricking, it would be a sakabato. And for those of you who have never watched Rurouni Kenshin, a sakabato is a katana with the edge on the reverse side, on the side that faces you. And it's supposed to represent nonviolence. It's supposed to represent the heart of the warrior, but in a nonviolent place, in a place where, killing isn't supposed to be done. Yeah. And I think that that's sort of like a perfect encapsulation of what tricking is, where we started out in martial arts. I don't have to, we don't have to pretend like we are still anything related to martial arts. We are literally about acrobatics, but we can still accept that we're taking the positive aspects of the heart of the warrior into the future.
Discipline.
I think that's
we have discipline, we have training, all these positive things without like, oh yeah, I want to kill people or something like that. Like
yes, that and I think it's also like, here's the attitude that I take towards our martial roots as trickers, right? Is like, I actually, as someone who has no martial arts background, I actually really respect it. And I really appreciate the martial arts background of tricking, that it like comes from XMA and etc. But like at the same time, I don't feel the need for like, if you're not kicking, you're not tricking. There's a measured response, right? It's like accepting and respecting where tricking has come from, but then also not taking it to that like radical extreme where if you're not participating in this one aspect of tricking, right, that you can't,
or that tricking is in some way like historically fixed, like it has one character and that doesn't change throughout time. That's clearly not the case.
Right. And there are, because the fact is that there are more than one character, right? It's not just the martial artist, it's the b-boy and everything. And personally, I personally don't accept those other influences, or some of those other influences like b-boy and other stuff, but
don't accept the influence from gymnastics. I'll be the first one to admit it.
See, exactly. We all have our biases with tricking, right? That we don't accept, but we still recognize as a part of the identity of tricking.
Yeah.
And
I also want to say there's two genres of guys that get into martial arts. It's those guys that are like weird and are like, yeah, I want to prove to people that I can beat people up, but they actually can't beat people up. And then there's the people who are like, this is fun, I just want to do this. So those are the two genres of guys that get into martial arts. So be the second one. Anyway.
Okay, so that's all we have to say on the cringe that was the arrangements of the battle and various things about them. At least, excuse me, the pageantry surrounding them. We haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty of like the function and the form of the battle, so let's get to that now.
Yes, that is.
I think that's actually a really good way to describe it all, Bryce, really quick, is just the pageantry. Like, it's so...
Yeah. It's so interesting because this really illustrates how Adrenaline fucks up in every aspect. Like, it's just like they didn't just screw up in how they arranged the battles or how they presented the battles. They did both. They fucked up in both. But
if you give them a way to fuck up, they'll find another way to fuck up in addition to the way that you've currently given them.
It's shocking, honestly. Like, I'm very surprised. Like, I'm genuinely surprised.
That's what I'm saying. Like, how can it be so bad? Okay, look, here's the thing. Okay, and I'm gonna name drop. Yeah. Sorry, boys. We're just at that level of sobriety and also in the podcast. I'm gonna name drop. If McGuire Kane was really a tricker, I mean, how hard is it to cater to trickers, dude? If you know what trickers want, if you spent 5 minutes around trickers, you know what trickers want to see. Mm-hmm. You know it's not this bullshit.
Yeah.
What are you doing? How can you be so out of touch?
We're getting back to, this is Michael Guthrie's birthday. It's his birthday party. Like, right. He's Princess Mike, and
Princess Mike.
It's we can't let him. We can't sully his name. He is what holds Adrenaline up at this point, because no other big name tricker wants to be part of Adrenaline. Like, even Tiki's like half in Adrenaline, half in Sam Kojo. So that sounded wrong. Anyway, he's
okay, but
I'd like to be fully in Sam Kojo.
If that's the thing, like if it came down to Sam Kojo or fucking Adrenaline, it's Trick Lab all the way.
Yeah, Sam Kojo, you have literally every ounce of my respect.
Yeah, and so like, because Guthrie's like their main pillar, they can't have him lose against anyone, so they don't put him against someone he will lose against, no matter what. And like, it's just, I don't know. And I've heard him say like, oh, Zen or Shosei has offered to battle me and then they declined, or I don't know, some weird shit like that. I don't believe any of it. Like, I think they would battle him if they had the chance easily. So,
yeah, I'm more likely to believe there was some logistical issue than that they got offered the opportunity to come to America and battle Guthrie, and they were like, you know what, fuck it,
yeah,
and
no.
then talk shit about it afterwards.
Because
here's the
would
thing.
smoke him.
Here's the thing. I like to believe that they actively declined the offer to come to America to battle for Adrenaline. I know that that's probably the most wishful thinking of all in this podcast, but if that is the case, imagine the precedent and the tone that sets for the tricking community. We have the current best trickers in the world refusing to get paid to flown out to America to participate in potentially the largest stage that tricking's ever been seen on.
Zen literally said, "This is why I leave," to an Adrenaline post. Like,
I don't know what it all. I can't pretend to understand the context or the meaning of that because I just don't. But the thing is,
he was talking about Demarcus' battle, and he lost, and then Zen was like, "This is why I leave." He commented that on Marcus's post
because the judging of the battles was clearly not legitimate, and that's like, honestly, that is the ultimate death knell for any tricking battle ever.
Yeah,
and that's why I brought up Trickstar a while ago, because Trickstar was it was like. It's honestly, you're never going to find a better example of how to fuck up your annual tricking battles than Trickstar, because it had so much hype. It had the entirety of the tricking community on the edge of their seat, waiting for the next episode, waiting to watch this shit. And then the final battle between Franklin and Guthrie came out, and everyone was like, fuck this. Everyone.
There's never a season 2. There's never
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. And different from Adrenaline, it did all of this while maintaining the identity of tricking.
Yeah,
and that was our biggest takeaway. That's what it was. That's what really I think this episode is about defending the identity of tricking. What does it mean to be a tricker? What does it look like to be a tricker to anyone, to your boys, to the entire world, right? Because up until now it wasn't called into question, but now it's being called into question. And if you're willing to allow it to be portrayed the way it's being portrayed, then that just tells me, like, your answer to that question is you're okay with it in this way.
Yeah, and so I really quickly want to explain to the people who are not caught up about Demarcus' battle. So you guys probably know Demarcus. He's an insanely good tricker. He's 11 years old. He's landing triple corks. He's landing quad full. And he had a battle with another kid who I really heavily tried to look for his name, and I could not find it, to be honest with you. So if anyone knows, comment down below.
And the kid deserves acknowledgement, because he absolutely was really good in that battle. He wasn't as good as Demarcus, but like he gave it like a very solid effort, and something that's absolutely worth. If I knew where to find more footage of that kid, I'd totally go watch it.
He put up a fight.
See, what's most disappointing about this whole thing is that it's almost like Adrenaline shooting themselves in the foot to give this kid the recognition and the acknowledgement of having bested such a formidable opponent, and the attempt to potentially like get them more well known has just like backfired. Like, no one knows their name, and in fact it is extremely disingenuous to like them being recognized for their skill and ability, right? Because like,
well, you're gonna Andrew Franklin them, right? Like, Andrew Franklin had nothing to do with the outcome of the Trickstar battle, but he got endless shit from everybody for it, and frankly, like, it just wasn't called for. As much as you can disagree with the outcome of that battle, like, Franklin didn't have any fucking thing to do with it.
He didn't deserve that, no.
Exactly.
No.
And neither does this kid. Like, he has literally nothing to do with the judging. The fact that he ended up winning is, like, literally nothing to do with him.
Yeah.
Not saying that he didn't perform really well. I'm saying that it's like, it was a decision that he had no part in.
And so, really quick, I just want to finish explaining the battle, just for the viewers that haven't seen it. But basically, it was Demarcus versus this kid. Demarcus, if you watch the battle, he blew him out of the water. Like, in my opinion, he won. No doubt about it. They had a tiebreaker because they tied. And it could be debated that the other kid could have won it, but in my opinion, Demarcus still won that pass, and Demarcus lost. So it was just such a
there's sort of like a weird thing where
it was an upset.
But like, in order to degrade the last pass that Demarcus did to the extent that it was degraded, you have to factor in the previous passes that occurred in the battle, because it just happened to turn out that Demarcus's sudden death pass was the same as his first pass in the battle.
Yeah.
And I am almost certain, and both of them had triple corks in them, by the way, so they were very technically difficult. But it was literally just like cheat 9 hook, touchdown rise, triple cork.
Yeah.
So the fact that he did that twice is, I think, what ultimately ended up counting against him. Even though the entire raison d'être of a sudden death round is that all of the other rounds don't matter, and now it's just what happens here. Yeah. So it's kind of fucked up how that happened.
So I actually haven't seen that battle, but with the context that Bryce provided, I do agree entirely with what you were saying, Bryce. Like I do think that if it were truly a sudden death pass, then it would be like the final pass that counts. And additionally, though in the context of the entire battle, a reoccurring pass is negative points, right? Or is a deduction of points. So I can see where this is kind of a contentious topic, to be fair, but it is also, I mean, I think the general consensus is that Marcus won. Like, I think that because there should have never been a tie.
There should have never been a tiebreaker. That's really it.
If you go back and watch that battle, you have to be very generous to the other kid to say that his 3 passes tie Demarcus's 3 passes. Yeah, you have to be very generous to him.
There's no way. And this is, people have some speculation attached to it. Like, the other kid was wearing an adrenaline shirt. We don't know his association with adrenaline. I try to stay away from that kind of speculation. The worst I will assume is that, like, the judges had an implicit bias, which means it wasn't explicitly told that you gotta vote for the adrenaline guy. They just had an implicit, like, this is an adrenaline event, this is an adrenaline athlete, like he did good, like, you know what I mean. That's the absolute worst I could say.
Trying to gas it up without the intention of inflaming the entire community.
Absolutely. And it might not even necessarily be like adrenaline specific. It might be a so Andrew Franklin was also training with the Jam people who were judging the event, but I feel like one of the things that played the role in the outcome of the Franklin and Guthrie battle was the anti-twisting, anti-modern tricking style bias.
Yes. That
the judges had. And that might be playing something of a role here as well.
Underdog bias is also a very real thing in subjective sports. So that, a lot of these factors could have played a part, but the other thing was the judges. And so the judges were Will Conies, Bailey Payne, and I think it was Cole Presley. I'm honestly not very familiar with that last judge.
I'm not at all familiar. I'm not afraid to say it. Who the fuck is Cole Presley? I know that this was counterintuitive to Bryce's other argument where he was saying like you can't use ad hominems. Right. But I'm saying who the fuck is Cole Presley though?
Okay. To be fair,
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
No,
but
no one here knows. No one here knows. Okay, and that's the thing is we are trickers with fingers on the pulse, at least somewhat. Right? I mean, we make a damn podcast for the community, and we don't know who this person is, and that's part of the problem with judges is that you're just picking these random people. No one knows who they are, and maybe it's to balance out the judging so that it appears to be more fair. But if you're judging a tricking competition, the judges should be trickers who are well known and respected, or people who at least know what they're looking at, know what they're talking about,
and they should be pre-informed to try to combat their biases if they are biased against the new generation. As an example, to bring up something we've already discussed, like you should actively, like, as much as when you're being brought into a battle, you're being brought to bring your specific tastes, you should also try to not like be
they shouldn't dominate your opinion.
Exactly.
Right? Like, you're being brought in for a specialty, but not for that specialty entirely.
If I'm judging a battle and I give someone a battle because they did a rise for their last pass and the last person did like 10 gainer switches to triple cork, but I just like rise more, that's stupid. Right? That's just stupid.
Yeah.
That's and that's obviously a really hyperbolic, a really overt example, but even with slightly more of leeway between these two things, it's still something that other people absolutely notice. And it kills your credibility when you do this.
And sorry. I was going to say, I was a judge for the Vertigo battles, and Vertigo did a really good job of this, where they were very explicit about, what are you guys judging? This is the biases we do want. This is the biases we don't want. And something they said was, keep some of your bias. Keep, for example, I told them that I do like power moves. Like, I do rate them to a higher degree, and maybe even some creative combos. Or creative transitions, I should say. and maybe I don't have as much care for like variations. And they're like, that's cool. Like keep some of that bias, but still try to be a little more holistic. And I think that's the best way to go about it, and try to get a variation of judges that have different likes and dislikes, you know?
Yes.
So
Right, because I can agree that like the first two panels of the judges that we announced, Will Conies and Bailey Payne, tricking vets, respect through the roof for both of them. No issues with that. They both actually cover different aspects of tricking. Will Conies is a little bit more unique. Bailey Payne doing a lot of power moves. And then, then we have this controversial throw in for the third judge, and it's like,
and I don't want to roast him too much. Maybe he's just like
no, and that is fair. I'm not trying to be harsh on him either.
Yeah.
But the point that we are trying to make is like,
but I would even have some pushback against Bailey Payne, because I feel like he's been a lot more involved in the parkour scene than tricking scene, which is perfectly fine. Like I love that he's doing parkour. He's really good at it. But I question how much he's been involved with.
Yeah, if you show me the lineup of other people there, there's a pretty good chance that I could have picked a better judge than Bailey. Even among the people who other people know.
Will Conies was a good judge. Will Conies
once again, yeah, Will Conies an amazing judge.
Yeah.
Literally no disrespect for Bailey Payne whatsoever at all. Like, I'm not saying that I think you're a bad tricker or a bad person or anything.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I think potentially there may have been a better judge.
Not even to like try to discuss it. I do think that Bailey does even out the creativity of Will Conies pretty well, in terms of like Bailey's tricking ability. But you guys do bring up valid points that he is not as engaged with the tricking community as Will Conies is, or other trickers or potential judges that could have been involved with the activity, right? I mean, especially if we're paying for trickers to come in to the event, right? Like all these adrenaline, international trickers. I mean, how hard is it to find 3 well-known, respected trickers who are engaged, active in the community? And
also with all the money you have, like you could totally pick like amazing trickers with that. But I don't know. I don't want to get too caught up in Demarcus's battle. We do have other things to talk about, like the
and really, it is just an example of a trend that has been repeating over and over and over again of badly judged battles. And there is no silver bullet solution to badly judged battles, because ultimately we're talking about something that's somewhat subjective.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be some people who come down and say that, like, look, I don't think I agreed with the judging of that. But when it's like overwhelming, when the majority of people can say that there was a problem with the way that battle is judged, then you've clearly done something wrong. And trying to come up with a system that avoids that is I can't stress this enough. It's mission critical. Trickstar killed themselves with one battle that fucked their credibility.
Yeah.
I agree with that, Bryce. I think it is mission critical if your importance or your focus is on improving, your reputation or your credibility with tricking, or, trying to maintain that identity of tricking. But if your goal is money, then you might have ulterior motives.
I don't think those are necessarily mutually exclusive.
Yeah, I think you can get money and do this at the same time.
Yeah,
I do think so too, but I think that other people don't see it as such.
Yeah. Well,
I think other people see more money that they could make
right
in the short term, maybe. Yeah, and something
I'm just trying to be foreboding. That's all. Sorry, boys. You guys tear me apart for it.
Yeah, you're good. We kind of touched on maybe a positive, so I'm just going to bring it up right now, and that's that I think the better way to judge battles, and maybe I'm biased because I judged the Vertigo battles, but they allowed us to rewatch the footage, which in my opinion, that's a game changer. That's huge, because recency bias is such a big thing in human beings. Like, you're going to remember the last pass most of all. And that plays into your advantage if you're a tricker. Like, if you're battling and the judges don't get to rewatch, do your best pass at the end, because that's what they're going to remember. But there maybe like 2 or 3 times where we rewatched the battles during Vertigo, and I made my mind up. At first I was like, oh, that seems like a tie. And I was like, no, it's clearly this person. I just forgot what their first pass was. You know what I mean? So I think that would be a huge step forward in terms of judging battles fairly. So
like, instead of tiebreakers, footage review.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and Bryce brought up a good point earlier when we were planning, and it's like it kind of fucks with the flow a little bit of like, oh, the instant gratification of getting whoever won immediately after. I would love to hear you guys' opinions in the comments. I mean, I was a judge, so I was very involved, but it didn't seem like it played too much of a part in like, oh, like fuck these people, they're taking too long to vote or something like that, So
I want to express that I think that possibly reviewing footage would provide adequate time for people to triggers to perform these sudden death tiebreaker passes, at the end of a battle if it were necessary, right? Like if reviewing the footage, it's like, oh, a tiebreaker is necessary. I imagine that after the amount of time spent reviewing the footage would be adequate to.
Yeah, well, you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it. It's like if there's a clear winner, there's a clear winner, and that's it.
Right? No. Of course. Yeah. But like if it's determined that that's needed, then there it is, and then you'd be ready to go. But
yeah. So some other problems is that there's no brackets. It's just like a battle that happens, and this is the world championship apparently, but there's no judgment that led to that. You know what I mean? It's just like we just picked two trickers. This is the world championship. I think there should at least be a bracket for that, or some kind of systematic way.
Imagine if the community could vote on who two would be, like which pairs would be the battle pairs?
Well, it'd be different. It'd be so different from who they choose.
I imagine we'd be way more likely to wind up with battle pairs that people were actually interested in the outcome of.
Yeah.
One thing.
I agree. And maybe that's a good solution to it, because brackets aren't perfect either. Brackets don't see every single trigger going against every other trigger. So that's a downside to it, on top of the fact that people get tired battling and doing so many tricks. It would be cool to just have one battle to figure it all out where they've trained really hard for this one specific thing, So that's one benefit I see.
Or maybe like at a gathering that's multiple days, instead of having your battles all on the night of the very last night, maybe you could have battles every night and have the bracket, progress across the nights, instead of, all right, we're going to do the entire tournament one night. And
Well, I think that that's a great idea too, Bryce, because it spreads it out and it invests interest in the second night of battles rather than just the first or second.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's actually, like, in gatherings, that's traditionally how it's happened. It's like Saturday is usually battle day, and Friday is the first night of tricking. So, I don't know. It kind of fits within the culture. But,
I don't think people are going to be upset at the prospect of having to space out their battles, because it literally just gives you time to prepare. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they would rather just do it all at once. That's one of those things that I would love to hear more feedback from other people who are interested in this problem about.
Yeah, and there's a lot of problems with battling. So like, feel free in the comments to discuss this. Like, we would love to talk about how we can make battles better, because there's no good solution right now.
No, exactly. It's a complicated problem. And I think the more people who are able to suggest things like, well, what is your best idea for how to deal with the judging problem, the bad outcome of judging? Like, that's an incredibly important problem, as I've already mentioned. And I really think that we're going to get the best solution to it by hearing a large amount of ideas and sort of subjecting them all to scrutiny, as opposed to just having like one or two and running with it.
So another problem with battle that I'm very interested in solving, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, is the advantage that the person who goes second has. Even in like a 3-pass battle, you have a huge advantage if you go second, because you could just you could just do the same combo and one up it. That's it. It's over. Like, as long as you're stylistically pretty good, it's over. You know what I mean? So I'm very interested in solutions to that problem too. So if you have those, feel free to drop them in the comment. But yeah, I don't know. That's not really a problem with adrenaline, by the way. That's just like
just
general.
Yeah.
So adrenaline, you're good there. That's like the only thing you've been okay with so far. So I think we can
take a short break from ripping adrenaline a new one to just say that.
Yeah. Back to ripping adrenaline a new one, though.
Back to my favorite activity.
Money and culture. This is the last point. I think it's the most important point.
Yeah.
And the reason why I think we aren't hyperbolic when we say that this is a problem, because money has a tendency to snowball. Like, if Adrenaline makes this huge event and people pay to go to this event and they make a profit out of it, they're going to reinvest that into the company. They're going to make bigger events. They're going to make even more money out of that. It just snowballs, you know?
Going to drive towards being the mainstream, or at the very least, the first way that most people are introduced to tricking.
Yeah. Those who get an early foothold have a huge advantage. Whether or not they actually mesh with the culture or not, it doesn't matter. And the example I've been bringing up to the boys lately is skateboarding. I have a friend who's a skateboarder, and he says that the skateboarding community at large is very divorced from what Olympic skateboarding looks like. And that is because Olympic skateboarding is actually run, like, the rules are set by this French rollerblading company that, like, isn't really that much in touch with skateboarding. But you know what? They have a shit ton of money. And that really is the biggest thing that plays a part. And so what we see as skateboarding in the Olympics is not reflective of the skateboarding culture at large. And so that's really what we want to prevent here. We don't want the tricking that goes to the Olympics to be the Adrenaline style of tricking, because
well at least I think that's what's being called into question. Is, and it's a point that we kind of highlighted a lot at the beginning, or at least I know that I was really trying to drive home, is what is tricking's current identity worth to you, right? Is it worth, sacrificing for the progress of tricking? Is it worth, losing tricking as we know it, as we recognize it, as we see it in our day-to-day experience? Like, is that worth the progress that we would achieve?
Yeah. Is some people somewhere being able to make money off of it, and most of them not even really enough money off of it? Is that worth losing this thing that we all cherish so much?
Yeah.
I've made my position clear, but
yeah, well, I think all our positions are very clear on that stance. So, and I, what I
and actually, wait, and for those people who are on Adrenaline's side here, that's really, because I have seen several people come to Adrenaline's defense, but not in the sense of like actually providing counter arguments to this, only in the sense of providing ad hominems. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I'm sure that there's at least one of you out there who actually has reasons for believing the things that you believe and are not just like not thinking about this. So making that assumption, I would really like to hear your actual, arguments on this topic. I would like to hear why it is that you think that the existence of a select few professional athletes is worth the loss of that culture. Because if you can actually give me a legitimate reason, I'd be happy to hear it.
That we haven't addressed in this podcast. If you've heard it fully, something that we haven't addressed here that you think is a legitimate reason why.
But just telling me that you don't know who I am, or you think I'm a hater, is not going to convince me, or basically anyone else. So just before you comment that, stop it. Get some help.
I think it's Jacob Pinner or Mike Guthrie who loves to do the thing where they're like, "Who are you?" It's like, great.
It's the dumbest possible thing in the world. It's like at any one time, for any fandom, the majority of people interested in that thing will not be famous, will not be experts.
But they have a huge impact on everything that happens.
They are literally the primary people engaged in that subculture, in that fandom. So pretending like they don't matter is literally stupid.
Yeah. So I want to empower you guys. You guys have a lot of pull, like our audience is who I'm speaking to right now. Have a lot of pull in the direction that tricking goes. And so something I've noticed is that sometimes people will talk shit about Adrenaline and still show up to their battles and their gatherings. And I implore you to consider, like, maybe not, if you really don't think that Adrenaline stands for what you stand for, then boycott them. It's just like that simple. It's just don't engage with Adrenaline. And when I say engage with Adrenaline, I mean in a financial way, in a way that's like giving them clout, in a way that's paying for their services or whatever it might be. because this is kind of the strongest thing we have against them is the financial leverage, because they're financially huge. So,
and if you want something to do other than just not pay them, then you could just take the early adrenaline route when they were trying to attack loop kicks and just throw a gathering right next to their event the exact same time and tell everybody beforehand that you're going to be doing that, and specifically say that it's not an adrenaline event.
Yeah.
That's absolutely something that you could do if you're looking for an action item. And it doesn't need to be a crazy event. It could be totally just like a grass session over here. But just to emphasize, like, yeah, I want a trick, and I even want a trick right now, but not with you.
Yeah, no, that's actually a really good idea.
Frank, I'm really triggered that you hijacked my call to arms, because I was going to be really strong about this point. Essentially, exactly what Frank said. Like, the only way, and as I said before, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, there's a lot of people who disagree with adrenaline. And if everyone who disagreed with adrenaline just didn't engage with adrenaline, didn't like, didn't comment, didn't share, didn't participate with, engage with, didn't give money to these adrenaline events, didn't do that, and didn't pay for Adrenaline TV, didn't go to adrenaline events, how embarrassing would it be if the only people who showed up to adrenaline events were the people Adrenaline paid money to show up to them?
Yeah.
That's how you get a trick star again. That's how you get a 1 year run of an event, even if a contract says otherwise. Because I hear there's talks about they have like some contract with Mandalay Bay. It's so fucking stupid. Yeah. Spend your money somewhere better, like in people who are actively invested in preserving the culture of tricking. Yeah. And whether that's talking tricks or otherwise, like, I mean, anything is better than adrenaline at this point, and I think we can all attest to that.
I agree. Either that or tell them directly. If you are very close to the people in adrenaline, tell them like, yo, tricking community is not cool with this. Like, this sucks. Just try this.
But here's the big problem, and like that I also want to like strike home to our viewers, is that adrenaline just doesn't care. Like, adrenaline doesn't care what the drink community thinks, because adrenaline isn't invested in what the drink community thinks. Adrenaline is only invested in money and a return on income, right? Or in a return on investment.
And throwing Michael Guthrie's birthday party
every year. Yep, at Mandalay Bay. Yep. What a fucking stupid event.
And they can continue forward with that philosophy because of the people who support them, in spite of the fact that they don't.
Right. Precisely. And so that's what I'm like getting at. Like, how embarrassing is it? CBS Sports comes out. CBS Sports may never come to another tricking event, but if it's another tricking event, if it's any other tricking event that doesn't look the way that Adrenaline looks, that's fine by me. Fine by me.
Well, CBS, and this is something I also want to address, because I feel like some people might push back and be like, but they're getting us in the mainstream by doing CBS Sports or whatever. Okay, great. It's not the mainstream that most of the tricking community wants, and that's very important to address, because that's going to snowball. We're going to get, if CBS is doing the sports right now, next is going to be fucking, I don't know, like ESPN, broadcasting their shit, and it's adrenaline. And now
it's also disingenuous. It's also disingenuous to suggest that they're getting tricking onto CBS. No, they're getting their bastardized version of it, right? They've excised all of the cultural aspects of it that make it tricking and replaced them with things from other sports to make them more marketable. Yeah. And then they're putting that on CBS. Yeah. That's not tricking. That's their version of it.
I can guarantee if they they have an early foothold, it's not going to be any other tricking company getting their shit onto ESPN or the really mainstream shit. It's going to be Adrenaline, because of that early foothold, because of their financial standing. And that's why we have to act really early. So, and like, I'm not saying this is a takedown of Adrenaline. I am, partially. But if they fix their shit, it doesn't have to be a takedown of Adrenaline. So.
Right. We're kindly asking that Adrenaline correct their behavior, because we want to see the identity of tricking preserved, as well as the success of tricking in the mainstream culture. I think we all can agree to that, and I don't think that those things have to be mutually exclusive. But yeah, exactly that.
And they have to be aware of it too. There's no way they're not aware of all the shit they're getting. Like, just read the comments.
No, they've just literally decided that they can weather this storm. It doesn't matter what you and most of the tricking community thinks. They can just keep going long enough until people either forget or don't care, or they've made enough money so that what you think doesn't matter. Yeah. And their tricking company specifically not for the tricking community as a result.
But here's another thing too that I want people who support adrenaline or may support adrenaline or may be on the fence consider is that adrenaline is not a complete tricking company. Adrenaline is also sports martial arts, and tricking is just one facet of them, and one facet that they attempted to be on the ground floor of, and that they have been successful in. And if they can be successful in this avenue, they can be successful in others, especially because of the fact that they got in on the ground floor. And so that's why it's imperative to participate in actively going against things that you don't believe in, whether that's adrenaline or otherwise. Yeah. Whether that's adrenaline or talking tricks. If you don't believe in talking tricks, you should be posting that you don't. And
tell us every reason why you think we're wrong, so that I can look at all of them.
Argue, yeah, and laugh.
And then not do a session where dissects. But,
right, exactly, and that's the thing.
Saying, like, I love arguments. It's literally my job to understand arguments. So bring it the fuck on.
And that's the thing is these things need to be challenged, because if they're not challenged, then nothing happens, nothing changes, we lose, and that's just how it will be. And I think that even taking a lukewarm approach, like the yeah buts or the lukewarm, like, oh, it's hyperbolic, like, that is just as harmful, perhaps not as harmful, but it is still very harmful to the overall cause of seeing tricking's identity preserved throughout all phases of its development.
Yeah. And this is kind of the last thing I wanted to personally mention, is that there's this idea that the middle ground is always the correct way to go, which I think is a fallacy. Like, it feels right. And I was definitely one of those people that's like, yeah, it feels right that, like, you know, some people have good points on both sides, so it should be the middle ground that's the correct ground. But this just isn't true. Like, it's just, it's not, it's like...
It's a misinterpretation of the maxim, there's a truth in every side of a story.
Yeah.
It's true. There is some truth in every side of a story, but there isn't equal truth in every side of the story. One might have 1% and the other has 99%. Yeah. I'm not telling you to reject that 1%. That's still true. Yeah. What I am telling you is you don't suddenly have to agree with that one thing because it has 1% of it correct.
Yeah. So don't be a little centrist, Andy, over here. You
can commit to one of two different decisions.
And it could be correct. That's the important part too. So yeah. I agree.
And that doesn't make you a bad person, by the way. It doesn't make you a bad person to commit to one of two different decisions, because whenever you do that, well, there are some things I'm sure you can decide to do that make you a bad person. But abstractly, just like a conceptual issue, just coming down one or the other way on it doesn't say anything about you as a person, because it has to do with what information you have access to at that moment, which is independent of you as a person, right? Where you were born on the planet, what time you were born in, whether you have access to the internet or not, like, these all influence whether or not you're going to come to the correct conclusion based on how much information you have. So someone not coming to the correct conclusion is not evil. They just don't know what you know. And if you turn around and start calling them names instead of just explaining what you know, then you're actually the bad person in this situation. I can actually give you some moral weight to someone's decisions here, and it's yours.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So, yeah, that's kind of my last piece on the situation. I think we can make changes to tricking culture and the future of it. But go on, Jason.
Yeah, my final thoughts on it are exactly that. Like, if we take action now, we can have we can impact tricking in a fundamental way. We can make it clear that what we will and will not tolerate. I think taking a passive stance is not going to get us there. I think we have to be, vigilant. We have to be strong. I know that some of the things that we outlined in this episode, like the actionable things, may be hard to do, like not liking and engaging with adrenaline content and stuff or whatever. But it's a price that we have to pay in order to, preserve this tricking that we love, the sport that has changed us.
I don't even think it's that hard. I have not known Michael Guthrie's power level for the last 4 fucking years, and I could not give less of a shit. So, because all his samplers are paywalled. So, and I just don't care.
And here's the thing, as someone like I still follow Michael and I follow other adrenaline athletes, but if they post adrenaline content or things affiliated with adrenaline, I won't engage with it. I won't like it. And that's a way that I can still support my friends or people that I look up to without engaging with something I don't believe in. And I think that we have to we have to take these hard stances, especially when something that we love and care about as deeply as tricking is being challenged. And
Absolutely. The
that's
tricking
quite
community
literally
is the
where we find
only group of
ourselves.
people who cares about this. So if the tricking community doesn't do something, then nobody will.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Absolutely. It's in our hands, and it's ultimately like we decide the fate of tricking. It's not going to be adrenaline, and
yeah.
it's going to
And
be how we responded to this.
don't gaslight yourself by telling yourself that you cannot do anything. Like, don't absolve yourself of responsibility by saying that nothing you can do will have any impact. That's just not the case. It can be something small. That's
Also,
okay.
tricking is a very small community. Everyone's voice really we hear almost everyone's voice. Like, there's people I've never fucking heard of, and I'll read their comment. I'm like, oh yeah, this dude said this. Like, people read that shit and know your opinion, So if anything, you have more power in such a small community like tricking.
Yeah.
So.
This is your time. Like we can really take it to the people who challenge our ideals of tricking, and we can do it together if we do it together. And I believe we can. Yeah. I'm trying to be as encouraging as possible for this.
No, that was a beautiful call to arms. I will leave you guys off on one thing. For the love of God, don't fucking buy a ticket to something you're not going to go to. Jesus fucking Christ.
All right, end of the episode. We're not even going
to...
All right.
Don't swallow the meat.
I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Peace.
Bye.